Tasha, good morning.
Morning, Kate. It's you again. It's us again. Hello.
It's us again, and we're here with Nayong Pilipino Foundation again and Tuklas Pilipinas Society for the second part of the Telling Heritage Stories for the Umpukan series. So kailan ba tayo, Tash? Kailan ka ba
Wednesday.
nag-talk? Ayun, okay.
Wednesday.
Last Wednesday, we had the first part of the Umpukan, and we were joined by three heritage professionals, Sir Boboy Costas Garilao and Natasha Quintanar, for interpreting local heritage stories. So from there, actually, ito yung ating second part, no, Tash? At excited kami dito personally dahil mga colleagues natin ito from the Philippine Archaeological community. Actually, last week, we had last Wednesday lang pala. Oo nga.
Yes.
We had a very interesting discussion with sila Tasha. And maraming mga concepts and ideas that were initiated in that talk. And we know for a fact that it would be interesting as well this morning, given na archaeology dito sa Pilipinas ay what do you think, Natasha? It's still in the budding phase. Marami pa tayong kailangang madiskubre at madiskubre.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
So last Wednesday, just a short briefer also. Marami ring mga issues or concerns that were put up there, like ano ba yun, Tash, yung mga exoticizing, local history, exoticizing,
intellectual property
rights. Issues of pride of place, authenticity, even romanticizing some of these local stories. And it would be interesting what would be the take of archaeologists here in the Philippines working on public archaeology. But before that, we would like to welcome again Dr. Laya Bukirin to tell us more about their endeavors here at Nayong Pilipino Foundation.
Maraming salamat, Kate, at magandang umaga sa mga nag-aagahan ngayon. Noong Wednesday, kinuwento ko kung ano ang Umpukan. Ang Umpukan ay multisectoral consultations ng Nayong Pilipino Foundation to develop the three programs that we have. Yun na yung heritage space, activities, and engagements that we have for the future site and elsewhere. And we also have the Knowledge Center program, Research Institute, at nandito din ang collection ng Nayong Pilipino Foundation, over 2,500 artifacts. And we also have the Cultural Leadership Institute. These are training programs for the Nayong Pilipino Foundation employees, public servants, tourism officers, and the general public. Gusto ko lang ibalita na from here on, we will welcome proposals for Umpukan sa Nayon. There are several topics we're particularly interested in. We want a proposal, for example, on the future NPF site, the potential of an urban forest na malapit sa Las Piñas, Parañaque, Critical Habitat and Ecotourism Area, o yung tinatawag na La Papachea. We also want proposals on nurturing spaces for co-creation and civic engagement. Bukod doon, sustainable tourism, and then the Nayong Pilipino collection itself, we welcome proposals on that. Cultural rights, ancestral domain, and self-determination, and also protecting the dignity of creating creative labor or arts and culture workers. So those are among the topics we're very interested in, and we will welcome proposals from here on. We will post an announcement later. Maraming salamat, Kate and Tasha. Back to you.
Thank you, Laya. So please check out the Facebook page of Nayong Pilipino Foundation for more updates regarding those opportunities. Actually, Tash, meron din tayong guest na kasama natin dito bukod sa ating mga archaeologists. We are also joined by the Philippine Federation of Deaf. Sila ay ating mga kasama dito to help us interpret para sa ating Filipino deaf community. You can look for their Facebook page at Philippine Federation for the Deaf. sa Facebook, so you can learn more about their initiatives here.
Actually,
Okay.
right now, he's joined by us so that they can have the sign language. Just in case a lot of you are watching, please look for Mr. Junjun Sevilla's box and just focus on his box while you're tuning into this program. Thank you.
Yes. Okay. Sige, dahil marami pa tayong pag-uusapan, I think we're ready now, Tash, to
Yes.
go to our first speaker. So ganun ulit, we'll have our speakers and then you can post your comments and questions on the Facebook page of Tuklas and also Nayong Pilipino. So for our first speaker, Tash.
Okay, so our first speaker today is Taj Vitales. He will be presenting the Manila Archeo Trails insights on engaging the public about archaeology in an urban setting. Taj Vitales is the program director of Tuklas Pilipinas, focusing on mobile lecture programs called Archeo Trails. He graduated Master of Arts in Archaeology at the University of the Philippines, Diliman. He was the former Vice President of Katipunan ng mga Archaeologists sa Pilipinas, or CAPI. So Taj, take it away.
Thank you, Nayong Pilipino and Tuklas Pilipinas for inviting me to share our insights and experiences about the programs, the educational programs that I've been handling for several years today. That's back in it's around 2014, 2015, the Manila Archeo Trails. So right now I'll be showing you some of the slides about what we do and how we communicate or interpret archaeological heritage to the audiences. So here we go. I'll just give you a whole view of it. Okay, so Manila Archeo Trails is an educational program that's offered by Tuklas Pilipinas Incorporated, and based on my experience in handling this program, this mobile lectures that we're talking about, we met a lot of challenges and how we are able to go around these challenges in creating the module or the teaching module for communicating archaeology to the audiences. Now, Manila is one of the well-known places in the Philippines. Aside from being a capital city and a very jam-packed area consisting of more than 1 million people, population composed of different ethnicities, of people of different social backgrounds and ethnic backgrounds, and a bit congested as well. Manila is also well known for its rich history and cultural heritage. And as you can see in this photo, this beautiful photo from Intramuros administration, that's a bird's eye view of Intramuros, one of the well-known historic places in Manila. And we know from our history books, most of the history books and historical documents, that Manila has been the seat of Spanish colonial power back in the 16th century, and ever since it has been one of thriving capitals, and not just during the colonial period, but also in pre-colonial period when the Spanish arrived. We know that Manila is already a thriving community when the Spanish arrived in the Philippines. So we know that they do also have a colonial past. So aside from history, we also know the past of Manila through archaeology, and since the beginning of the 20th century, there have been a lot of archaeological investigations and studies in Manila, and one of those famous of this archaeological discoveries that were found in this city is the 12th to 15th century site in Santa Ana, which was actually burial site in Santa Ana, which was found underneath the church and its vicinities. And we know from this archaeological site that Manila has been a very um, flourishing village, flourishing area way before the Spanish came. So, like I mentioned, this is around 12th to 15th century. So you could see, there's a lot of burials and artifacts that were found in this site. No? So aside from the research-driven archaeology, we also have archaeological sites that were discovered and then investigated due um, to the developments that's happening around in the city, Manila. So through salvage archaeological activities and archaeological impact assessments, we were able to record and investigate some of the sites that have been exposed during earth moving activities like road constructions and building constructions. And some of those famous, most of these uh, sites that have been uncovered were in Intramuros, some also in Binondo and Santa Ana. No? We've been finding a lot of colonial period structures and features around these areas, from as early as 17th century to around perhaps even 16th century, 17th century, even up to as recent as like around 19th century. And this photo is one of the salvage archaeological or archaeological investigations in recently in Intramuros, wherein they found evidences of sewers or sewage systems uh, that have been uncovered during the road construction, the road rehabilitations. So as you can see, we have Manila is rich in archaeology, and it's you could tell that we can actually easily um, share this to the people about what archaeology has been doing around here in the city. And as we thought, well, now we'll be showing to you what are the challenges that we have in in delivering and presenting the archaeology around Manila or in Manila. No? So Manila Archaeo Trails. So it's about experiencing archaeology in the city, and most of the lesson theme of Manila Archaeo Trails is about understanding its pre-colonial history. So we can see from all the heritage structures and from the history books that uh, Manila, it has rich colonial history, and most of us have that kind of idea. But how about the older Manila? What is Manila like before the Spanish came? So that's one of the first of the challenges that we want to overcome or to deal with when we talk about the history of Manila. And through mobile lectures, and also before that mobile lectures thing. So this one I want to show you again the photo of Intramuros, and it's beautiful Intramuros because this is the site of our educational program. The Archaeo Trails are mostly held, and of course, if we're talking about the older Manila, which saan pa ba, which place pa ba would be the most appropriate, kundi the site itself of the original village of Maynila, which is in Intramuros. So that's where we'll be. We were actually discussing or community archaeology of Manila. So again, Archaeo Trails are mobile lecture programs, and mobile lectures basically it's a learning experience, more like an alternative classroom learning experience. And it helps facilitate learning and engagement with the audience by letting them explore, discover, interpret, and of course, there's also question archaeological concepts and some historical knowledge while going through different locations. So although most of us would think that it's no different from the tour guiding, but we want to go beyond tour guiding because it's not just about showing places and telling the stories of specific sites. No? mobile lectures is about uh, explaining archaeological concepts and by using the sites. So we're not just like, it's not just like a one-way, it's a one-way discussing of or sharing knowledge about archaeology and history, early history. It's about engaging the audience of what they think about and what they discover about the past by letting them explore around the site, letting them experience the the place itself, the site itself, and giving them a lot of exploratory exercises. So this is one of the examples that we've been doing. So I'm not just lecturing them like this what you think that you're seeing right now, but we're letting them explore for themselves and discover some of the facts. And if there are any questions, if there they do, it's free. It's a free discussion from students, and out of their thoughts and out of their from their thoughts and insights the about the lessons and the things that they've been observing. That's where we also get we form our discussion as well. So that's how mobile lecture works. It's a two-way street. It's not just a one-way street. So now we Arca Trails is basically about, it's about archaeology, it's sharing archaeology. So some of the experiences of Arca Trails is going around archaeological sites for them to see and how archaeology is being done, and to see how we as archaeologists understood what we're trying to study in the archaeological sites. However, some of the challenges we have, especially in Manila, in Intramuros, is how about what if we don't have any archaeological sites? So Manila is one of the examples. No? So even though we do have a lot of archaeological investigations, the sites are mostly being covered with dirt afterwards. No? Especially that most of these archaeological sites are being discovered through AIAs and salvage archaeologies because of the development that's going on around the city. And we cannot leave these archaeological sites exposed. So most of it are being covered. So basically, all of the archaeological sites, almost all of the archaeological sites in Manila are already being buried. So we can't even visualize what we're trying to see regarding the archaeology of Manila. So one of the challenges is the lack of this visible archaeological sites that can be viewed or visited. So however, there's only two that I know that archaeological sites around Manila that they let exposed. So all in all, there's most of it is not actually being exposed. Now the second challenge is communicating archaeology effectively in an urban setting. So we know that Manila being urban setting is a mixture of heritage structures, the positive structure, heritage structures, and modern buildings. How would you explain archaeology? How would you let them experience archaeology in a city? So one of the ways that we try to address this challenge of in communicating archaeology is by utilizing built heritage and heritage spaces and we used it as venues in explaining archaeological concepts. So like I said earlier, mobile lectures is not just like showing around and telling the story, or telling stories about the story of or the facts or the information about certain sites. We can also use heritage spaces and built heritage sites as examples in explaining certain archaeological concepts. And most of it for the audiences to relate on the certain archaeological concept, because some of it are sometimes pretty technical. And even the prehistoric or the historical knowledges or ideas could be very historical. We try to give examples that is really relatable. We discuss certain lessons that are certain relatable for the audiences. And we use this concept, the past is not a foreign land. So that's a concept of that we're trying to, or principle that we're trying to present or to engage with the audiences, with the people, no? And past is not a foreign language means that whatever we're like doing or our attitudes today might not be as different as what the people in the past has been seeing or their viewing or their attitudes of it. So that's actually basically the concept of it. So I will give you some of those examples later in some of the sites. So like I said earlier as well, the mobile lectures is about teaching archaeology or um, engaging in discourse in archaeology by going through different locations. So in Manila Archaeotrails, we of course we chose Intramuros as the main area, for discussion, and we chose specific lecture sites in each for the for this lecture. No? So the format of or the flow of our module is actually we have a topic, then each topic has a guiding lecture points and questions, and from each of these guiding lecture points are actually in each of the locations that we designate. So we have Fort Santiago, Casa Manila National Museum are the points of the lecture sites that we chose um, in the Manila Archaeotrails. Now, discussing about the pre-colonial Manila is pretty broad, and we're trying to avoid the danger of bombarding all our audiences, all of the information that we know about pre-colonial Manila, because that's one of the things that we're trying to avoid there. No? Give them all the information. We don't want information overload for students and audiences, because it will be too much for them. Not that it's technical and it's some of it are pretty unfamiliar. No, it's hard for them to remember. No, so uh, what we did is we narrow it as much as possible into a specific challenging question or problem, and from there, that's where we put a lot of guiding questions that could lead to answer that challenging problem. So, for example, in pre-colonial Manila, we actually narrow it out to understanding settlements, but still pre-colonial settlements are still pretty broad. So we try to go further into what are the pre-colonial houses until we arrive on this specific question. Now, what does Raja Sulaiman's house might have looked like? Now, Raja Sulaiman, we know, is the last chieftain of Manila when the Spanish came. So one of the last chieftains of Manila, no, when the Spanish came, and that's what we try to find out. We want the audiences to find out. So we know that Raja Sulaiman is the last chieftain when the Spanish arrived, but no one knows exactly what does Raja Sulaiman's house might look like. Now the rationale between understanding houses in pre-colonial means that house sometimes represent, or most of the times represent, mostly the culture of the whole community. House can sometimes represent them. The houses are sometimes some sort of microcosm of the culture of the whole community, or the cultural lives of the whole community. So where we begin in understanding what the Raja Sulaiman's house might have looked like. And from there, we try to, put some guiding questions that could lead in answering this challenging problem. So where else to begin with but in the famous Fort Santiago? And I want, for those who have been Fort Santiago, I guess we already know why. We will begin in Fort Santiago. Now, I don't know if for those who are listening right now or who are viewing right now, can someone tell me what's the significance of Fort Santiago in understanding in our topic about Raja Sulaiman? So if there's any for you who are answering there, so okay. So Fort Santiago for those who have been in this heritage site, is the original site of Raja Sulaiman's residence or house. So before the Fort Santiago was built, it was originally the residence of Raja Sulaiman. So that's, excuse me, that's where we will begin, where we began our discussions. So basically, the question here is about uh, why did Raja Sulaiman, at least the whole community of Maynila, before the Spanish came, chose this particular area or this location around Manila Bay? Now, that's one of the questions, Ana. And now, one of the experiences that we did in asking, in engaging the students is asking them about this kind of relatable questions. So I remember we asked them in one of our architecture programs. We asked some of the students now, if you're gonna choose a house or an apartment, what will be the categories or the things that you will consider in choosing a house or an apartment? So based on our experience, a lot of students would answer somewhere near groceries, somewhere near leisure places, somewhere near restaurants or anywhere that they could eat. So basically, anywhere that's near that has amenities in the vicinity. And for them, one of the good discussion points here is that for us to choose residences, to choose a place to settle in, of course, it's a actually we want to settle somewhere that is accessible to all the things needed for us to survive. So that's how we start to discuss about the importance of the landscape in understanding why do Manila flourish during that time. And of course, we talked about river settlements and the strategic location of Manila between the river and the sea in in um, in receiving in in trading and in acquiring some of the daily necessities that they have, like food, water, things like that. So that's how we discuss about we discussed in Fort Santiago. No? It's about the role of the landscape in the past and in understanding the archaeology of the area. So that's aside from digging, like most of us would know about archaeology. Archaeologists also studies the landscape for them to understand why do this certain archaeological sites exists. So that's how we do it. So moving on, our next area is in Casa Manila, and you might wonder, what's the relationship of what does a colonial house has to do with understanding the pre-colonial Manila. So remember that the question is about how does Raja Sulaiman's house might have looked like. So this, first of all, it's the same house, no? But also remember that Raja Sulaiman is a chieftain, and being a chieftain means you have to be well off or wealthy for to gain such high status like that. So for us to understand how does a high status person's house look like, what we did is we use the colonial houses or bahay na bato as an inference in discussing the pre-colonial houses, pre-colonial chief houses or elite houses. So that's the reason why we chose Casa Manila as an example or as illustrative. So what we did, this is actually where the bulk of, some of the activities were also been done. No? So as you seen earlier, that some of the students or the audiences are holding a mini booklet. That's actually their activity booklet. That's where they put their notes, and at the same time, we also put a lot of activity pages there, so they could actually do some exploratory activities while they're exploring around the house. So we let them go to the third floor of the house, where there's a lot of and we have them draw the house plan and list some of the interesting, some of the objects that they find interesting, that interest them. They find very notable and noticeable. So some of it from our experience is they notice a lot of ornate designs around the Casa Manila, or that most of the they notice a lot of porcelain materials in Manila, inside Casa Manila, and outside porcelain, we also found a lot of important materials, and that's how we now that's where the discussion starts. No, it's about what does a elite houses are made of and the value of the objects. And of course, we cannot discuss the concept of an elite house without comparing it to a non-elite house. So we also have an example of common houses such as Bahay Kubo for them to see the comparison between what an elite house looked like and what a common house, non-elite house looked like. So we see now the social differentiation in the material culture of the Filipinos, and we use that as an inference in understanding how the differences of pre-colonial houses would be like. So that's another thing. No? So that's how we discuss here in Casa Manila. Now, lastly, we go to the National Museum of Anthropology. We don't go through all the galleries there. We went specifically to this gallery, the Faith, Tradition, and Place, in at around, I think it's in the third floor. Yes, it's the third floor of the National Museum of Anthropology. And now, for those who are viewing, I guess you already, some of you have an idea why this is the lecture area that we chose. And that's because Manila, the pre-colonial Manila, has some Malay communities. Actually, Raja Sulaiman is practicing Islam when the Spaniards came. No? It was being recorded, and actually some of the people, actually the community in Manila, were basically called Moros, because when the Spanish came, they've seen some of them are practicing Islam, and that's why we brought them to Bangsamoro art of from the National Ethnographic Collection for them to see what is the material culture of our Bangsamoro brethren, or people from the south look like, to give an inference to give us an inference of what there's people in Manila, pre-colonial people in Manila before the Spanish came, their houses look like. So we let them roam around, and we had discussions, and we actually list some of the objects that the Spanish recorded in Raja Sulaiman's house, and we let them find and search around the gallery, and from them we try to compare them, and we try to explain to them that some of the Islamic and cultural concepts behind the art that's going on, and that's going on around the material culture of the Bangsamoro. So back in Casa Manila, we talk about the ornate, some of the ornate houses that could define what of an elite house in colonial Manila, which is actually can also be seen in a Torogan house in among the Maranaos, the ornate pieces of the panolong, which separates them from ordinary houses in among the Muslim communities, in the south. So that's some of the examples of it, and from then on, that's where we try to build. Now, from this 3 locations, the sites, we were actually leading them now to understanding more about what Raja Sulaiman's house might have looked like in the past. So here, so answering my main questions now, to recap everything now, we had Fort Santiago, we discussed about the role of landscape and its strategic location. So what can we most likely find in and Fort Santiago being near the rivers and the sea. We could possibly find boats and some of the fishing implements, and we could find a lot of being a center of a strategic location for trading. You could expect to find a lot of trading materials inside Raja Sulaiman's house, and being a chieftain's house, the value of foreign objects is being emphasized in Raja Sulaiman's house, as we've seen in Casa Manila. The foreign objects and porcelain are what some of the valuable items that have been displayed around in Casa Manila. No? Now, to understand further what is a chieftain who's practicing Islam in pre-colonial Manila looks like, we went to the National Museum of Anthropology, and through the Bangsamoro culture, we inferred about how houses might have looked like in the past. And in the end of it, we asked the students and our audiences how they could reconstruct Raja Sulaiman's house. So that's actually the gist of most of the Manila Archaeotrail is like. So beyond that, we also have some other activities like how can we interpret artifacts. Since we're already in the National Museum, we have them look for 3 specific objects and around the National Museum, and from these objects, how would they interpret objects like that in relation to what we've been discussing about the pre-colonial Manila. So we have also some of those assessments for us to know if the students are actually keen, or if they really understood the lessons that we've been sharing to them, and the lessons that they've been discovering in this lecture sites. So, okay, that's all that I can share. So thank you very much.
Okay, thank you, Taj, for that presentation. I think we are now ready to move on to our next speaker, Tasha.
Our next speaker is Mylene Leasing, and she'll be presenting the shifting context and relevance of archaeology. Mylene graduated International Master in Quaternary and Prehistory at the Muséum National de Histoire Naturelle in Paris, France, and a master's degree in archaeology from the University of the Philippines, Diliman. She is also a lecturer at the Department of Sociology and Anthropology from Ateneo de Manila University. As a local herself, her work in Cagayan Valley involved being in the Kalinga expedition team since 2014, a consultant for cultural heritage in the Cagayan province, pro bono, and a cultural deputy for Cagayan Valley, National Museum of the Philippines. Currently, she is specializing on cultural heritage management and is a PhD student at the Goethe University in Frankfurt. Hi, Mylene.
Hi, Tash. Hi, Kate. Good morning, everybody. And thank you so much for inviting me here. Okay, so I'm going to go straight to my presentation, then maybe we can chika later. The title that I chose, Shifting Context and Relevance of Archaeology, I chose this because of the times that we are in right now. And we're going to talk about this more as towards the end of my presentation. But first, let me tell you, and since this is what you were asking me to begin with, what we do in the site that we have been working at in Rizal, Kalinga since 2014. And I am having technical difficulties because it's not, okay, what's going on? There we go. Okay. So I have been a part of the Rizal Kalinga expedition since the first season in 2014 under dig director Toma Enjico. And this is our site, and that is our colleague Kat Manalo. And it's an open site. So as you can see, it's where quite literally very open, and we have to bring in tents for shelters during the day. This is John DeVos, a paleontologist, and this is the moment where he identified the first tooth that we found in 2014 as a rhino tooth. And since then, so many objects, so many specimens have been coming out. We have been finding and properly excavating from the context, so many archaeological materials. And this is Kat Manalo again at that moment where she turned over what we thought might be just another rock, and it shows the herbivore tooth pattern. And since then, like I said, we have been finding so many things. Of course, this is now a rib being cleaned in the laboratory here in Manila. Some years are more productive than others. And we were published in May 2018 in Nature, where we talked about the stone tools and the faunal materials, the animal bones with cut marks that were found and analyzed by the specialists in our team. The main challenge with prehistoric sites is that they are not self-conscious. They're not meant for public consumption. We don't have temples. We don't have ceramics. There's nothing to really look at. They're not built to accommodate people, much less crowds, unlike churches and temple complexes that are really built for that specific purpose. They're not created to inspire awe. They are very fragile, especially a site like ours, which is out in the open. They're not conducive for visitors. They lack, well, when I say aesthetic features, it's the kind that people normally who visit tourist sites, what they expect. But the view in Kalinga is, oh my gosh, it's so incomparable. It's beautiful. You have a 360-degree view around you, and you see the Cordilleras in the back and Sierra Madre in front. Yeah, but typical aesthetic features it doesn't have. Very often people live or use these sites, and most of the time it's for agriculture, which is exactly what we have in Rizal, Kalinga. So what we've been doing since 2014, aside from the usual archaeological activities, the site has been known and has been rumored since the 1970s to have buried treasure. So, well, especially I think it's very common in the north not to for people to believe in buried treasure. And a lot of con people have taken advantage of this. But they haven't really found anything. So what we do is, aside from our archaeological activities, we go to the townspeople. We invite them for lectures, for interaction with the team, so that we can discuss, we can talk about these things, and they can ask questions. And there's a two-way interaction. It's not just us giving lectures. So here, and we do it to different sectors of the public. Here, talking to some grade schoolers, some school children. And here you'll see, this is in the town sports arena with the general public. Again, here's a smaller group. And then our team has always been open to the idea of welcoming people to come and watch us work. So kids who walk to and from school drop by and ask questions and watch us, and we let them do that. We realized that this was important because in 2014, when we announced that we are opening the site to visitors, within a week, close to 1,000 people came and walked 3 kilometers, no shade, through rolling hills, to come and see what we were doing and to ask questions. So I'm not the only one that does these lectures or interacts with the locals. Everyone in the team is asked to do so. So here you're seeing John DeVos explaining something about, I think it's a bone, to the people who have come. A lot of them come, and every year it's like this. When we are there, there are times that students come, their teachers bring their classes, and we allow them to watch and to ask questions. The team also has lectures beyond Rizal, Kalinga, when needed. So here what you're seeing is Toma Enjico and I think Marian Reyes of the National Museum of Natural History delivering a public lecture about Rizal Kalinga. So very important part of the team of, we have a multi-stakeholder team in Kalinga, and very important is of course the participation of the National Museum. So much so that when we had a press conference about our publication in Nature, it was the top brass of the National Museum who were there to present the press conference. And the team was there too, with the exception of Toma because he was abroad. And then it was no less than Director General Jeremy Barnes of the National Museum who introduced the event and our publication. So what I'm going to present to you now, I'm going to show you now what kind of lecture do we give the locals when we are in Rizal Kalinga. So I'm going to go quickly through these slides because the point is not to show you each slide, but just to give you an idea what kind of lecture we give them. First of all, we capitalize on that word treasure that everyone seems to be enamored with. And then we deliver it in their native language, which unfortunately I'm very bad at, but I can try. I do try, and I know a little bit more by this time. So some of these slides, because of some technical issues, when I transferred them to this presentation, the acknowledgements were not transferred along with it. So some of these, a lot of these images I've taken from Kasaysayan and from a book from Indonesia. So I'm warning you already that I stole from the internet. So what do we ask them? What do we tell them? We tell them why we are there, why, who we are, what we do. We show pictures of the team in action, what we are doing. So nothing is secret, so that there's no reason to make chismes. Who are we? We introduce each member of the group. What do we do again? What we have found. So we also show people who are from their communities who work with us. And then this gives us the chance to talk about archaeology, to introduce what it is, and prehistory as well. And then we also get to talk about a very important topic of geology, without which and without the presence of a geologist in the team, it's not possible to do the research. And then we show them the history of the site. When was it first discovered, and why is it very interesting to researchers? Hold on. Okay, and then we show what has been found in the site, what we are finding, what kinds of extinct animal, we tell them what kinds of extinct animals lived there, the stone tools, and how the humans could have utilized and made these stone tools. And then we answer their their frequently asked questions. Of course, they are still allowed to ask questions in the end. And since one of the most frequently asked questions is how did the animals get there, it gives us a chance to talk about glacial maxima. So like ice age and the lowering and increasing of sea levels, enabling animals to come in, etc., etc. And then, of course, the biggest question is who made these stone tools? And that gives us now the chance to talk about human evolution. And we tie it with the story of human evolution from elsewhere, going back all the way to Africa. And then, of course, the closest human Homo erectus site in Sangiran in Indonesia. And of course, the closest archaeological site to our site itself, 40 kilometers away, of course, Calao Cave, where Dr. Mandy Mijares discovered Homo luzonensis. Geologically, both sites are within what we call the Cagayan Valley. So when we say it's within Cagayan Valley about archaeological sites, it's not we're not talking about political boundaries. We're talking about a geological locations. Okay, then we say that Rizal is unique. It's important to the study of history and prehistory. We always emphasize that it's for all Rizaleños, and it can help in improving the economy, tourism, commerce, education, and of course, sa pagsikat ng Rizal. We also give them an idea what other countries do with sites similar to theirs so that they can see how you can actually make use of this or utilize it for the community. So here we are looking at sites in Tavel and in another part of France earlier. This is in Indonesia. And then we tell them, so what you have here in Rizal is something that is unique and incomparable, and it is for the benefit of everyone in Rizal, and it's something that is for many generations. And the real treasure of Rizal is its natural beauty, its archaeological heritage, and of course, its people. So that's the kind of lecture that we give to the locals. And this is a slide presentation that I prepared in October for October 11, 2019, when I delivered a project that I will introduce to you later. A lot of these ideas that we are implementing in cultural heritage management are ideas that have been fermenting in my mind since I was working on my master's thesis, which was on the heritage management of Calao, Peña Blanca, where Homo luzonensis was discovered. And here, while I was doing my master thesis, I went out and interviewed people, and I took some data. I had a questionnaire, 40 item questionnaire, and interviewed 120 people from 4 barangays surrounding Calao Cave to ask what is their awareness of archaeology and prehistory, what is their awareness of presentation efforts that have been done, because archaeology was being done there. Archaeological research has been done there since the 80s or 70s, so roughly 40 years. And what are their attitudes towards community awareness and involvement, and towards CRM? So the questionnaire was divided into these 4 areas. And in the first, for the first area, you're seeing here the pie chart of the answers to the questions in that section, and you will see the blue area. That's the predominantly no, I don't know, they don't know what was there, they don't know what was being found, they didn't know. And then here you are looking at the awareness. Again, the blue area of the pie is like they're saying they don't know about the local museums. If they went, they didn't understand. And in the third, now here is something very interesting. In the third portion, the blue now is the positive response. I should have used another color in hindsight, towards cultural heritage management. Because blue now is like, yes, I want to be involved. I'm interested. I want to know more. And then here, their attitude towards community awareness. And you can see the blue area now is so much bigger because, this is positive. They really want to be involved. They want to be counted. They want to participate in the heritage management of the archaeological site. It was also during this period that my eyes were open to the threats to prehistoric sites, because again, they are not really made for public consumption. And here you can see Carabao logging or small scale logging, slash and burn agriculture, charcoal making, and of course, very unique to Calao, where I work also with the provincial government, is the vandalism in caves, treasure hunting still, and then you have your hacking of and taking of stalactites and stalagmites, plus using the cave for other reasons. Again, these are locations where people live, so you can't really blame them for taking shelter in these places. And the other thing that I discovered when I was doing my master thesis is a lot of the unpublished material or information, research material, were still in typewritten form, and they were already breaking down because many of them were in onion skin. So this need to be digitized, and so that still has to be done. And the other one was the presentation part. At that time, and I emphasize at that time, the museum really needed help. The presentations were like, okay, let's not go there. But thankfully, with Governor Manny Mamba's efforts and attention in his new administration, Cagayan has put up and utilized this beautiful 100-something-year-old building, the old Carcel, and has relocated the provincial museum there. And it's a work in progress, and it's a very good start. And it was there that Mandy Mijares was able to deliver a lecture about his discovery of Homo luzonensis, and we were able to bring the French ambassador to see the museum last year during our Kalinga season. Why am I bringing Cagayan up with Kalinga? Because these two sites are intertwined. Anyway, so in the context of my master's still, I thought that CRM in the context of archaeology might be defined as the management of archaeological resources for cultural heritage applications, where management involves planning and creating strategies for conservation, interpretation, communication, and sustainability. I noticed that the word management and the concept of management is not receiving a lot of attention in our field. And I do believe that we need to focus on this more and study and implement this more in our projects. Our cultural heritage applications are the initiatives and the efforts and the activities that, when you carry out, render cultural heritage relevant for the current society. Also, I came up with this CRM cycle where you'll see here archaeological research would be the starting point for us archaeologists, and it's pretty self-explanatory. You keep it going. So when you involve stakeholders in conservation, protection, etc., you foster a sense of ownership and stewardship. And by doing this, you engage the public more, and this creates more value for everyone. You create knowledge that is useful in other contexts other than archaeology, which leads to integrated development of the community and which generates more support for our archaeological research. Now, very important here in this cycle, I think, is the participation of cultural heritage management archaeologists. Is there such a thing? I don't know. I just made that term up. Okay, but the point is, you see here, specialized training and education. Dati kasi, when you're working in cultural heritage management, and I still think that's still the norm, it's a sideline. Everyone's focused on doing some other thing, whether you're a taphonomist, you're studying the bones, the stones, the pots, but no one was really, and heritage management is just a sideline. I don't agree with that, and I think that needs to be changed now, and we need specialized training and education for archaeologists who will focus on heritage management, which is what I was doing. And I think we need to push this forward, even though we have been ridiculed in the past, and there have been people from our own field saying that, how is this archaeology? Well, here we are now, and yes, it is archaeology because it entails focus, attention. You need to focus on these things and for these things to happen. And me, I make sideline. Yeah, I'm there. I excavate with the team. It's the other way around. I excavate with the team during the season. If they need assistance in the laboratory, I'm nakikilinis. Then they do all the analysis. But for heritage, I'm the one focused on that for heritage management. I'm the one that goes 4 or 5 times a year to Rizal, Kalinga, to talk to the local government, to talk to the people. I go to Cagayan to talk to the people in the museum, to the tourism officer. So you really need focused attention on this subfield. And these are the principles of cultural heritage management. And these are the stakeholders that I've identified. And you can put these two in a matrix so you can see that not everyone needs to participate in all those principles. So some people will participate in specific and do specific tasks. This is a horrible visual. I need a better one. Okay, so why are we doing this? Because we need to create innovative ways to foster meaningful engagement and participation of the public for the promotion of science and conservation. Now, this science and conservation, very important. The message that we deliver should be based on science and not from people's opinions, unfounded opinions, or something that they've pulled out of God knows where. We need to use the facts, and we have, because archaeologists have generated so much awesome results from their research for decades. We have so much. Facts that we need to share. We just really need to figure out how to share it better. and make it meaningful to the audience. By engaging the participation of the public in science and the practice of archaeology, we're looking at a multiplier effect and increased relevance and importance and acknowledgement of science and scientific work. So there's nowhere to go, but it's better, but up in terms of archaeologists, because then we will be generating broader support from a broader audience that will lead to sustainability, or so we hope, of course. Now, outside of Kalinga, one of the experiments that we've done, this was in 2016 with Kozos Inc. Of Marites Quisha, we posed the question, like, what if we took a very esoteric topic like human evolution, coming from a place that a lot of people don't really know about, which is Georgia. And what if we came up with an exhibit about it and see how we could deliver this message, this story, and see how people would get interested? So this is still like, you know, you look at the broader context now of Kalinga, and we're going outside of it. So this is the traveling museum, which I put up in 2015, and this is the first Humans of Africa exhibit that we created, and we brought in the chief, the primary investigator, as well as the Director General of the Georgia National Museum, who is also one of my mentors, David Lord Kipanidze. Here you see him with the Georgian ambassador, the Georgian honorary consul, 3 presidents of 3 universities, my husband, Gemma Cruz Araneta, and then Vice Mayor Joy Belmonte when we opened the exhibit in Ateneo. So you have Father Jet Villarin from Ateneo, Vincent Fabella of JRU, and Fred Pascual of UP then. So here is our opening in La Salle, where you're looking at Ramon del Rosario cutting the ribbon with the Czech ambassador Yaroslav Olsa then. And we did this in 7 universities, and you have Senator Sonny Angara here tweeting about our exhibit when he came to speak and visited it. And then here in ASP, for the very first time, you have then Chancellor Mike Tan and then President Fred Pascual cutting the ribbon of our exhibit when we brought it to ASP. Of course, here with Mandy Mijares, and here's Marites Quisha of Kozos. Yeah, so we also have Fred Borromeo, Honorary Consul of Ethiopia, and then here you have Lito Asenero, Honorary Consul of Georgia. So we're involving a lot of other sectors beyond archaeology and beyond the academe, as you will see later. Okay, what's happening? Yeah, so here are some comments. Okay, this is the exhibit itself. We brought this to 7 universities, and not just any university, but 7 of the biggest universities in the capital city of Manila. And we did it for a whole year. We started in February and started February in Ateneo. We ended in December 20-something in National University. Here again, in University of Santo Tomas, you're seeing the ambassador of Spain. And this is Kat Manalo delivered in our exhibit. We didn't just let the exhibit sit there. We had a TV, of course, but we also had lectures within the month that it was there. We had other activities. This is Kat Manalo lecturing about human evolution. And we never had an audience smaller than 200. And I lectured about Dmanisi, Georgia, and the 1.8 million year old human fossils and animal fossils and stone tools there. But what is interesting is these kids would sit here for an hour and a half, which is stretching their attention span, but they would stay on after even longer, a lot of time, to ask questions. And we'd stay longer to answer questions. There's also an opportunity for us to introduce Mandy, who we knew at that time, 2016, 3 years before his article identifying finally Homo luzonensis as a new species. We got him we introduced him to the academe, and here he is in his alma mater, UST. You have again another member of someone from the diplomatic corps, consular corps, Carlo Buenaflor, consul of Spain, with the ambassador. This is in Ateneo. You are looking at early high school students, grade school student. This was people coming to see the exhibit. Here you have a homeschooled student coming in with his parents. And then, so we involved other people within our field of archaeology. You have Tuklas Pilipinas, bringing the sandbox archaeology, which we did, and it became the thing. You know, it was agawan. People were fighting over slots. Initially, we just wanted to do 40 slots. We would reach up to 120, and Tuklas was so wonderful. They found ways. And then here we have our lecturers, and this is Toma and Jico, and this is why it has something to do still with, this is within the framework of Kalinga, because this is, aside from, of course, talking about human evolution and the fauna and all of that, this is our dig director here talking about human evolution. Then we also have Christine Hertler, who is a biologist lecturer within that framework. And I just put this picture in because everyone here looks so cute. Now, after the exhibit, we brought this, everything that we put on exhibit and then some, to schools who were inviting us. We were being invited. Take note, we were not writing schools to go there. Schools up to now are inviting us to lecture about human evolution. These are college kids now. And even business groups. This is the Rotary Club of Manila, the oldest Rotary Club in Asia. And they invited us also to talk about human evolution. And then this is where Boboy, I think this is where we met for the first time in person. Professor Stephen Acabado and I were the speakers at the gathering of UCLA alumni in Manila, where their chancellor came, and he tweeted this message. So going back to Rizal Kalinga, we developed this exhibit for the town about the things that we were finding. And we did our best to make it as professional as possible. I had the graphic artist to make all of the merchandise materials. And then we had the National Museum making the scientific casts of the things that we exhibited. So this is the first time that they had an exhibit in that town. Now, we also engage with media. As you can see here on national television, Kim Atienza came and reported about our exhibit. So that was aired on national TV, but also take a look at the number of views later on in YouTube. And then when we were in Kalinga, we also engaged with local media here in the Woke Up Like This, because I really woke up like that. Look, this is an early morning talk show on radio. And sometimes when we are not there, local media also comes and interviews the LGU. So you really need to brief. Your LGU has to be up to speed with you on what you know and the facts that you know, so that they can give the interviews themselves. And we do that too. We brief and we train local people, especially local government people. Now, this is the unthinkable. Glossy magazines interested in what we're doing. Yeah, 71,000 like that. Here in this picture, you have the Delomlis, discoverers of Homo antecessor, and Michel Brunet, discoverer of Sahelanthropus chilensis. And if you look in the back, there was Don Johansson being interviewed. He's the discoverer of Lucy. Now, more importantly, we were also able to bring the content of that exhibit, Human Evolution in the Philippines, to another country, which is Indonesia. And we were able, but in a slightly different format, again with the same cast of characters, the Georgian ambassador and David Lord Kipanidze. But now here with us, you have a very high-level government official, a deputy director of their Ministry of Culture, and of course Harry Widianto, who was one of my professors in France, and also now a very high-ranking government official in their Ministry of Culture and Education. So all these things allows us to tackle this question: why should we be talking about prehistory, and why is it relevant to us now? Number one, because it's our common heritage, as well as the heritage of the people living in that archaeological site. But most importantly, it helps us understand or provide an understanding of ourselves as humans and what it means to be one. And what does it mean to be human? That means that you're not just there to engage with them because you need something. So our team in Kalinga and even in Peña Blanca, we go and we engage with the locals outside of archaeology. Like for example, when there is a natural disaster, we do our best to engage and to be one with them by sending relief goods, distributing relief goods. And the latest project that I had, well, this one, I got a grant personally, and it's although it's not from within our team in Kalinga, it's still within that framework. We have always believed that since we are doing work in Kalinga, it would be nice for them to have a public library. Since they are so curious, they are so interested, so they should have a means of obtaining information. So in 2018, I was able to get a grant from the Gerda Henkel Foundation, 100,000 euros to put up a public library for them, which we did and we completed in October 11. We were able to move our Rhino of Rizal exhibit there because that exhibit that I showed you earlier, that was wrecked by Lawin. So now we have a permanent exhibit there. And we were able to give 18 computers, all internet capable. So you have this town in the middle of nowhere. It was called Liwan when I was growing up in Cagayan because it means outside. And now they have a library that's internet able. And this is our guest of honor on the day that I delivered the library on October 11, 2019, Governor Ferdinand Tuban of Kalinga, here with Alfred Pavlik, representing the Gerda Henkel Foundation. All the books are brand new. Everything's brand new. Computers, all furniture, air cons, they have their library cards, and the first people to sign up and who were in tears because they were so happy were, of course, the teachers, the public school teachers. And here are your kids coming in to make use of the library. These pictures bring me to tears. And look at this. They now have this place where they can come and get information, as well as look at this. Kid is on the internet without his slippers on, but hey, he's got a computer to himself. And there are a few of them. So this is our last project. Now, before lockdown, we were also able to bring in another very important, well, everyone's important, but a group of stakeholders are the scientists, the archaeologists that do research. And thanks to the Homo Luzonensis Conference in Cagayan, we were able to bring all the foreign participants to our site in Rizal, Kalinga. And they were able to visit as well the library or the ecotourism center. So again, as you can see, we really do our best to involve as many stakeholders as possible. And we believe that this is the way to make our management of the site successful. Here, you're looking at Director General Barnes of the National Museum and French Ambassador, the previous French Ambassador visiting our site. And here I am with the second in command of the Czech Republic embassy, and they are donating some books for the library. Okay, what am I showing? This is the training of the librarians by professional licensed librarians from Manila. And this is now new mayor of Rizal Kalinga, Carl Baak, when I was turning over before the opening the library to him and explaining to him that this is a project that we got, and the funding was from us, from Gerda Henkel Foundation, with no politics involved. And that is now what is known as the Rizal Kalinga Ecotourism Center, in which you will find the public library, the Rhino of Rizal exhibit, the community hall for gatherings, and it also becomes a tourism hub. Well, now, eventually. So again, working on that same philosophy of involving as many stakeholders as possible, here prior to the COVID lockdown, I went and we were meeting. Here I'm meeting with the Cagayan State University CEO because he was interested in what we were doing. Of course, we've already started working with Governor Manny Mamba and his people in Cagayan Valley and in Cagayan Province with the National Museum personnel assigned there. Here, right before COVID hit, with Governor Ferdinand Tuban of Kalinga and his tourism officer, provincial tourism officer Lorraine. And then, like a few days before lockdown, Secretary Berna Romulo Puyat actually called me in for a meeting with the Department of Tourism, OIC, regional head then to discuss what to do in that area in terms of cultural heritage management of these sites. These pictures are like right before the lockdown. So we really need to involve as many people as we need to, because when you're doing heritage management, you're going to have to answer so many questions. Primarily, what are your resources? You have to assess what are resources available to you. How are you going to get access to these resources? Who are going to be the implementers? What is your feedback mechanism? How do you know you're doing the right thing? What are the metrics you are employing to measure and evaluate if you are indeed doing the right thing? And do you have short, medium, and long-term plans? And all of this, you need to design a system that will create value and relevance for the prehistoric heritage that will be of interest to the general public. And this should encompass what I have mentioned earlier, the principles of heritage management. Most importantly, the involvement and engagement of all stakeholder groups to hopefully achieve this elusive sustainability. And this is our all-female members of the team leaving Rizal Kalinga site on our last season in 2019. We don't know when we're going to be back, and this was taken by Randy. There are no males here because they're in the other car. We don't know when we are going to be back. We are now in the middle of a pandemic, and it's probably a good time to reflect on what to do next. And I leave you with my favorite slide from 11 years ago that I stole from the internet. And I think this is an opportunity, though it's a crisis. It's a crisis for a lot of people. People have lost lives. People have lost loved ones, and people are losing jobs. But I don't think we're not in the normal now, and it doesn't look like we're going to be going back to any normal as we have known it. Just ask anyone who was traveling before 9/11. Things do not go back to normal. And besides, ask yourselves, was normal even that great? Anyway, so let us all take this opportunity to reassess where we're at and where we want to go and how to do things so that we become relevant to those whom we serve. Thank you.
Hello, we're back. Thank you so much, Mylene, for that comprehensive talk. And I think we can, I'm sure there are a lot of questions or reactions from our audience kasi ang dami nilang information ni Tash and ni Mylene. But I think we can move on, Tash, to our next speaker from Kalinga to Palawan.
Yes, so we're now moving on to Lionel De Castro with her presentation entitled Creating Heritage Narratives, Experiences from El Nido. So Lionel is an archaeologist based in the Philippines. Her interests lie in creating avenues to make heritage learning more accessible to the youth, especially those coming from the communities closest to archaeological sites she has worked in. Her National Geographic Young Explorer project, the Dewell Valley Community Museum and Ecotourism Plan, is an attempt to find ways to bring archaeology closer to the community, promote heritage conservation, and hone her skills in science communication. She also heads the Handy Project, a cultural heritage education program for the Save the Ifugao Terraces movement, or SITMO, based in Kiangan, Ifugao. So hi, Lionel. Thanks for being here.
Hi. So I'm Ellie. I'll be doing some storytelling. In 2004, the Palawan Island Paleohistory Research Project was born in the Dewell Valley in El Nido, Palawan. after a few years of seed excavations by the National Museum. It was initially a short-term stint. As the story goes, they said, try lang natin a few years, then let's move down south. But year after year, the project directors decided to come back for one more season. Every year, one more season until they realized, okay, we're in this for the long haul. And so instead of moving around the island of Palawan, looking for bits of prehistory, the project got rooted in the Diwel Valley. Year after year, through the slow process of careful excavations and detailed analysis, there was just more archaeological information coming out. The digs at Ile, the base camp, and the most accessible limestone tower in the valley have revealed presence of tiger and 2 species of deer that are now not found anywhere on the island, human occupation for over 10,000 years, a 9,000-year-old cremation cemetery, a shell midden spanning a few thousand years, and a Spanish period cemetery of over 100 burials. Not to mention, all other limestone towers in the landscape are archaeological sites as well. These finds led to an increasing number of participants in the project and an ever-growing list of research questions. When I first joined the project in 2015 as a graduate student, I brought with me questions of my own. I was interested in finding out what the local community thought about the 100 or so burials that were excavated in Ile, how they thought these human remains should be stored or displayed, where they should be kept, and what we should do with them. In those conversations, what became clear to me was that while our local community knew about the excavations, they did not know much about the archaeology. And as most of the adults were recent migrants, they did not consider the archaeology as their own. This was the starting point of the work that I have been involved in for the past 5 years. I became interested in the archaeological project's contribution to stories of heritage in the valley. Because while the adults didn't see the stories as intrinsic to their narratives, there was something different about the children. All of the children of the Diwel Valley were born after the start of the excavation project. And later on, spoiler alert, I would learn that they saw the archaeology as part of the narratives of their lives. On my second year of joining the project in 2016, we, a team of enthusiastic individuals from varying fields, archaeology, anthropology, education, social work, community development, archiving, and even architecture, started heritage initiatives that involved 3 strands of public archaeology that the PIPRP had already begun: communication, site maintenance, and tourism. In terms of site maintenance, we were building on the fact that in 2010, the local government of El Nido purchased land in front of the cave, and that in 2015, one of the project's major funders donated a building to be used as an exhibit hall for the project's finds. So the work was cut out for us. With the help of the municipal government, we were able to retrofit the building to make it blend with the landscape even better, and to have local workers and crafters take part in building and designing it. Inside, we have an ever-evolving exhibit, slowly improving year by year, fitting the narrative more and more. For tourism, the local tourism office has always been enthusiastic about sharing information about the archaeology to town's guests. For our part, and in recognition of the fact that El Nido is a booming tourist town, we sat down with as many people as possible to open conversations about the tourism that they envision. The most exciting part was creating this learning program for our kids, all of whom live in the valley. The program was built upon sharing more information about the project, getting the students to share about their place, and figuring out how archaeology fit into their narratives. We started off with an archaeology workshop in 2016, inviting students to come over to the site during the excavation season so that we could share information about the excavations and to find out what they wanted to see in the museum, what they thought tourists should know about the Diwel Valley, and also how the Diwel Valley looks like to them in map form. They knew a little about the archaeology and wanted to know more. They found their place beautiful and wanted to take care of it. And as shown in their maps, they saw the karsts as natural place markers and monuments, even the ones they don't often go to. Returning a few months later and jumping off from their answers to those initial questions, we came to their classrooms to talk about the excavations. For the daycare up to the 3rd grade children, we used a storybook. Pwede bang maghukay sa Palawan, coloring sheets and stickers, and even an alphabet. A is for archaeology. For the grades 4 to 6 students, we were aided by skeleton spots and chocolate chip cookies. For the high school students, we treated the cultural mapping activity as sharing sessions, as they told us about the different cuisines, places, games, feasts, events, industries, and intangible assets of the valley. We also set up a one-day display of artifacts from the excavations and asked them what the Diwa Valley means to them. Later on, we set up a museum workshop where we discussed the concept of a museum because at that time, many of them had never been to one. Aside from the one in the barrio next to the Diwa Valley, the next museum would be 6 hours away in Puerto Princesa. We also did a pop-up museum where we asked them to bring something that represented them and their families, staged song, poetry, and story writing contests with Diwa as a theme, and asked our kids what they can do to take care of the valley. We also made museum boxes and asked why they love the valley. Once the next excavation season came around, we had a geology workshop and an astronomy activity and another archaeology workshop, this time asking the students what they could do with the knowledge they had gained so far. All of these activities were always run as two-way conversations. As much as we tried to share the story of the artifacts and excavations, we invested our time in listening to them describe the valley that they live in, telling us what it means to them. To our kids, Diwa is a place of archaeological natural heritage, which has been used repeatedly by different groups who lived thousands of years before them. A place that they appreciate growing up in and that they recognize as intertwined with their and their family's existence. Unlike the older generations where many trace their identity to Ibahaya clan, their children identify themselves as homegrown to Diwal. They think of Diwal as a place to be protected and where their participation is important in its maintenance, a place that they are proud of and feel responsible for, and a place that has potential for tourism. They think of Diwal as the only home they've ever known. Their answers also told us about archaeology's place in their definitions, the excavations as a seasonal occurrence, something they've grown to expect year after year, and Ile as a focal point for their community identity, as a recreational space that they're quite fond of, the place they go to with their friends, their literal jungle gym. And their answers also gave us an idea of how we can move forward with the work that has already started, by finding ways to keep their traditions alive and to develop their landscapes for and with them. Easier said than done. This process hasn't been all rainbows and sunshine, and there are still many things left to do. Tourism for us is both a boon and a bane, as it provides livelihood for tour guides, but also contributes to land speculation. Looking at the development of the tourist town just 30 minutes away, one becomes fearful of the changes that may happen in the landscape in a short span of time. Site management is a continuous process of troubleshooting, maintenance, repairs, conflict resolution, and relationship buildings, with highs and lows all the time. And our programs with the kids continue expanding to other topics, geology and biology, and having a greater reach. One of our most special moments recently was a camp we did on site with our high school kids last year. 4 days of exploring the valley and ending by creating a mural of their dreams and placing their handprints on the wall of the exhibit hall. Placemaking and learning intertwined. While it is a slow process, our commitment to education and sharing the story to our favorite audience is clear. Our museum curator, homegrown in Diwal and a talented bamboo artist, said it best when he said, "Marami kaming turista na buwibisita, pero mas gusto naming makipag-partner sa mga kabataan, sa mga eskwelahan para makapag-facilitate kami ng mga programa. Gusto naming ituro kung ano ba ang history ng Diwal Valley, sino ba ang mga unang nakatira dito, ano ba ang naging pamumuhay nila." Like everyone else, this pandemic has affected our plans. We were supposed to have a jam-packed summer of activities, repairs, upgrades, workshops, exploration walks. But we'll be saving those for another time. Right now, tourism and the other industries in the valley are unstable, and our kids can't go to the site. But we will find ways to bring the learning to them and to share stories again once the time is right. I'll end the story here, hoping for better days while preparing for difficult ones. This has been the story of creating shared narratives, linking the narratives of an archaeological project that has been in the same place for 2 decades to the story of a place that has been in the process of becoming for thousands of years. Millions, if you include the geology. This is a story of all the placemaking that has been done, acknowledging the bumps while being optimistic about what lies ahead. A story of creating better sense of identity and belonging and making archaeology relevant today. An archaeological heritage project and the heritage of an archaeological project. That is our story for now.
Yay! Thank you, Ellie. Actually, Tash, ang ganda nung yung first three presentations din natin kasi nakikita natin na iba't iba yung approaches to telling stories and to engaging different types of audiences.
Yes.
Pero meron pa tayong huling
Yes.
speaker at who's making rounds now in social media because of his work. Yes,
Okay,
Tash?
sir, are you still there? We want to welcome Sir Stephen Acabado, who is presenting on knowledge, co-production, and co-creation, heritage conservation and education in Ifugao, Philippines. So he is an associate professor of anthropological archaeology at UCLA. His archaeological investigations focus on indigenous responses to colonialism, particularly in the early modern period Southeast Asia. He has active research programs in the Philippines and Taiwan, which involves active collaboration with indigenous and descendant communities. He is a strong advocate of an engaged archaeology. Hello, Sir Boboy.
Hi. Buenas noches de Los Angeles a todos.
It's nighttime.
It's 8:31 here, but I'm very honored and thank you to Tuklas Pilipinas and Nayong Pilipino for providing this venue to share our work and to highlight the role of archaeology in story making, developing narratives that involve collaborating with various stakeholders. So the first three talks focused on, sorry for screaming kids behind, my kids are playing. Let me look for, okay, there you go. So the first three talks focused on specific programs that involve working with various stakeholders. And for archaeologists, it's very important that we realize and be aware of these various the power behind the relationships among our stakeholders. So my talk today will be mostly focused on the new research methodology that we're seeing among archaeologists who work with descendant communities and indigenous populations. So I'll initially talk about what community archaeology is and stakeholder engagement, and then talk about briefly our work in Ifugao. And the Ifugao Archaeological Project is part of it started with my dissertation work, where Taj actually participated in 2007, and then, or maybe 2006. And Ellie participated in 2014 and 2016. So we have two alumni of this research program. The community archaeology and stakeholder engagement make archaeological practice more meaningful, especially when the results of the research empower descendant communities. Archaeology is in the position to change flawed history as a discipline that has been on the forefront of highlighting the inadequacies of some historical narratives. This archaeological model also has the potential to shift public perceptions of the discipline, where the general public thinks of archaeology and archaeologists as esoteric entities. More importantly, it helps to decolonize archaeological practice. In this short presentation, we highlight our work in Ifugao, the place where misrepresentative historical narratives have relegated the Ifugao, the people, to the fringes of history. Active collaboration among community members, archaeologists, and other stakeholders has resulted in a research program that can be described as participative archaeology. It also initiated the development of an indigenous archaeology in the region, as demonstrated by the Ifugao Community Heritage Galleries, which also serve as the Ifugao Indigenous Peoples Education Center. I emphasize that this is not just me. This is a collaborative work with Kiangan descendant communities, particularly Marlon Martin. So I'm also representing him in this presentation. We situate this shift in archaeological practice in a regional perspective, since Southeast Asian archaeologists have recently shifted to active engagement with local stakeholders. This is due to the realization that involving communities often result in meaningful research outcomes. A growing number of investigations are actively seeking the involvement of communities as both contributors and as active and involved research participants. These undertakings humanize our community partners and counter the exclusivity often associated with scholarly authority. An increasing number of scholars approach research as interdisciplinary, breaking state and ethnic boundaries, and engaging communities, emphasizing that we no longer work alone. In Southeast Asia, the deep archaeological record and long colonial histories provide an interesting case study for cultural heritage. The clash between the romanticized pre-European contact and the glorification of the colonial experience is evident in how heritage is understood by descendant communities. The rampant temple looting in Cambodia, the nebulous conservation programs in the Philippines, and Thai-centric programs in Thailand illustrate the need for a paradigm that will help develop policies consistent with the Southeast Asian experience. The need for community engagement is key to an inclusive archaeological practice. We further add that community archaeology should be should be a key component and not a consequence of archaeological investigations. Although the concept of community archaeology is complex, we understand that it requires a two-way engagement between archaeologists and various publics. This participation of the community was the first step in the launching of the Ifugao Archaeological Project. This has contributed to the community taking control of their heritage through the IPED Center. Recent archaeological findings from Ifugao demystify pejorative assumptions about the origins of the Ifugao rice terraces, and as some of you are familiar with the recent Inquirer article, through our engagement with local educators in developing revised history curricula, this archaeology has begun to provide a more nuanced understanding of Ifugao history and culture, because local history is not just part of the curriculum. The establishment of the IPED Center provides an alternative venue where Ifugaos can learn about their heritage and history. And as you know, the Ifugao, the research in Ifugao and an understanding of the waves or of the peopling of the Philippines was a consequence of the colonial scholarship that started with the Spanish and later popularized by the American colonial government. And our curriculum, history curricula, hasn't really changed more than when it was developed more than 100 years ago. And for some of you are familiar with the St. Louis Exposition, where the Igorots were the centerpiece of this event. This was used to justify the continued administration of the Philippines by the United States. During this time, it was unthinkable for most Americans that the United States was engaging in such imperialistic endeavors when the United States was born out of protest, was born out of the fight against subjugation. So they were fighting for freedom, and here they are in 1898, occupying several countries that they took from from Spain. And so during this time in St. Louis, they juxtaposed the the igorots, the dog-eating igorots with lowland constabulary band composed of Filipinos who were playing Western instruments. So in this case, they were showing that you have these highland peoples who are still needed, who need help to be assimilated in a civilized world. And then they showed local constabulary or Filipino constabulary band who were under the Spanish rule. And in a sense, they were showing that here, colonialism works. And this was also the time that H. Otley Beyer applied got introduced to the Philippines. And so he applied for that job and he got it. But Franz Boas also applied for this job, and I'm just happy that he didn't get it. Otherwise, I won't be here talking about the Fugao. So in this case, Filipino identity is based largely on the last 100 years of scholarship. And this is because of the American curriculum that was developed and introduced to the Philippines at the turn of the 20th century. So the assumed differences that we see today are products of colonialism and history rather than biological, environmental, or more and other adaptive differences. And the findings of our work is actually doesn't lessen the value of the terraces. Rather, recognizing the short history of the terraces humanizes the Fugao rather than reinforce the exoticism associated with the long history model. It also emphasizes the sophistication of the terrace builders and their ability to adapt to environmental, economic, and political pressures exerted by the Spanish conquest. They were not mere spectators on the sidelines of history. Rather, they were active participants of colonial processes with novel and resilient ways. So to decolonize the past, descendant communities should be empowered through knowledge production involving local realities. This can be approached through the galvanization of heritage conservation through curricular change, which has the potential to facilitate engagement. We, however, realize that the institutionalization of indigenous realities is a hallmark of modernity, the sort of thing that we are attempting to temper in the region. Nevertheless, this shift is needed since teachers are trained in history curricula based on flawed premises. As mentioned above, focusing our engagement on select segments of Ifugao community is important because we are aware of differential power dynamics in the region. There's no way to stop the assimilation of the Ifugao to the wider Philippine political and economic realm, but we can tap the institutions provided by the new system to empower Ifugao descendant communities. Collaborating with teachers expands the reach of our advocacy. We also encourage the teachers to invest in heritage conservation because through it, they can go beyond mere pedagogical themes and learn about their past. In this case, Ifugao teachers can base their lesson plans on discussions with elders and fellow teachers, not regulations from the centralized Department of Education. The community museum that I mentioned a few slides ago was an offshoot of the Ifugao Archaeological Project and a brainchild of Marlon Martin, the co-director of the Ifugao Archaeological Project and the chief operating officer of the Save the Ifugao Terraces movement. And it is a classic example of co-production and co-creation of knowledge. And so here's a photo or an image of the museum or local heritage museum. And the community museum described here has become the venue to contest dominant but pejorative historical narratives. Although our scholars write that collaborative museums processes illustrate negotiations of new languages through which the colonized have been forced to speak, our Ifugao experience suggests that community members decided that they would be the interlocutors of their own heritage. This is the community's response to the designation of the community or of the Ifugao Rice Terraces as UNESCO World Heritage Sites. which superficially appears to be a great advantage for Ifugao local communities. However, the nomination process and the subsequent recognition ignored local communities. We were correct, or Waterton Smith were correct to point out that communities of expertise have been placed in a position that regulates and assesses the relative worth of other communities of interest, both in terms of their aspirations and their identities. Other communities, therefore, have endured a less than equal footing from which to make claims about their past, their heritage, and their self-image. So a shorter history of the terraces does not diminish their value as a UNESCO World Heritage Site. Rather, it reinforces the awareness of the technological and cultural sophistication of the people who constructed the terraces. This sophistication allowed Ifugao to rapidly modify their landscape to fill valley after valley with terraced rice fields within 200 years. It is now time to lay the antiquity debates to rest. They only serve to exoticize highland peoples. Moreover, the differences that we see today between highland inhabitants and lowland populations are products of history and colonialism. It is more important for us to acknowledge that we are in danger of losing these historical and cultural monuments, and that we have a responsibility to take part in preservation or preserving our heritage. Most importantly, we have to acknowledge the value of community involvement in our scholarly research and conservation and development programs. And our work in Ifugao is detailed in this fresh off the press article that came out this morning. So if any one of you is interested in reading about our engagement work in Ifugao, please shoot me an email, and then I'll share a copy of this article.
Hello, we're back. Kamusta naman, Tasha? Thank you, Sir Boboy, for that beautiful presentation also.
Ayan, umikot tayo ng Philippines. Thanks, guys. Thanks for your presentations. We have a few, we have questions ready for you. For Mylene, how do you translate the concepts of archaeology, prehistory, and geology to the local community?
Well, you have to, first of all, you need to get the facts from the archaeologists themselves and the geologists themselves. And then you figure out a way to translate it to a language that is understandable to the community. And sometimes you have to use concepts that they can relate to. You need to use words. You need to illustrate. Sometimes you need to make a demo. You don't just limit yourself to verbal communication. You need visuals. You need to act it out. Like there was one example when we were trying to illustrate just how far back in time is 709,000 years. So we got kids and we said, of course, using what you have to always use what they know, what is relevant to them. So we took two kids and we said, okay, you're 0.0, and we put a kid next to him and we said that, okay, you're the point where Jesus Christ existed on earth. And then, of course, this is no longer scientific, right? So we're just showing the distances, and then this is where we're at now. So we put another kid. And then we said, okay, 709,000, let me ask for a cell phone. Why? We're going to call him. He's probably in Tuguegarao. That's how far 709,000 is. So, you know, you have to be creative in illustrating and conveying the message that you want to convey for them to absorb. But it always has to be in a language, or whatever language that may be, visual, action. It always has to be translated to a language that they understand, that they can relate to.
To Mylene for that.
Thanks.
Thank
Sir,
you.
this is second sa second natin na question, pwedeng maganda siguro sumagot dito si, I think si Linel and si Sir Boboy. Telling the heritage story is nice and important, but how do you make it sustainable so that people from different social class can appreciate heritage? Kasi I noticed also that in some of your works, di ba may iba't ibang type of audience dun sa communities that you work with. So how do we really make it more sustainable? Linel? Sige, Ali.
Yeah, so for us, I think if they consider it as their story, then they will pass that story on. It will have its own life. Nababawasan yung burden, I guess, or yung role ng archaeologist because a story that is a part of your life ay ikakwento mo sa iba.
Tama. Kumbaga, if they consider, kumbaga may ownership kasi dun sa narrative na meron sa kanila. What about sa case nila, Sir Boboy, sa Yangan?
So there are two components to the question. First is sustainability. So heritage conservation is it's a difficult job. There a thin line separates spectacle and cultural preservation. So most of the programs that you see in the Philippines, for example, appear to be very spectacular, it's like performance even. But it has its advantages because without bringing the money, the income from tourists, then you wouldn't be able to support the maintenance of these kinds of performances, rituals, in the case of Ifugao, all rice-related rituals. So for sustainability, we have to think about income. So without a really sustainable or maintained income flow for heritage communities, all of these programs will have a shelf life of 2 years, or very short shelf life. Because in the end, if you have nothing to feed your family, I don't need my heritage. I can't eat my heritage. So the other question is about inclusivity. How do we develop inclusive programs? Because at least in Ifugao, you have various Ifugao communities. You have different Ifugao communities that tend to have to be distinct from each other. So when I talk about my work in Ifugao, people say that you're only working in Kiangan, but there are other aspects to that work. And for us archaeologists, we have to be aware of our role in the power relationships in these communities. I know all of you are aware of the power of the local government, the power of barangay captains, and we contribute to those kinds of power dynamics. So for us to develop a more inclusive program, then we have to make a stand. We have to choose people that we work with, but at the same time, we cannot antagonize other peoples. So we have to be open to be transparent to all concerned stakeholders.
Thank you, Sir Boboy, for that.
Hi, Kate. Can I say something about on sustainability? Thank you, Boboy. Every time you speak, I learn something. Okay, about sustainability, I think that one thing that I can't even say guarantee that, but will ensure a longer period of sustainability. And something that I mentioned earlier that it's not being given enough attention to is management. You have to have a plan. You have to manage that plan, and you have to manage the strategies and the goals. You have to manage people, and then you have to have a means of measuring your success or otherwise, and you have to have a means of checking yourselves if what you're doing is correct or it's effective. I don't think, I have to disagree with Linnell. I'm sorry. I don't think anything is going to take a life on its own. These things will happen, and if sustainability will happen, it's because it's in the plan, and it has to be planned and managed. These things that you're seeing on TV now, these are not spontaneous things. These are planned, and there are people planning these things. So I don't think that heritage management or inclusivity and all these things involving the community, nothing is going to happen on its own just because you said that you involve them, that you include them. Most probably, these are just going to die a natural death unless you have a plan and unless you manage that plan. Thank you.
Thank you for that, Mylene. Ay, sige, go, sir.
So one of the things that we mentioned in that new publication is the existence of community museums. Community museums tend to be a counterpoint to national museums, nationalized museums, because of course national museums have their own ideology, and in the case of the Philippines is to highlight the Filipino culture, but community museums highlight their own culture. But in Ifugao, community museums that we see are private museums that cater to tourists. I haven't met an Ifugao who's been to the Banawe Museum without a tourist behind them. In my more than almost 20 years working in Ifugao. So inclusivity would have to be developed. So you have to think about programs that will cater to the local population, and then also the sustainability of these programs. So I think a case in mind, and Linnell is familiar with this, is the Ifugao Heritage Galleries that they included a business side to it, the textile production. So on the one hand, you're continuing to provide a venue for younger generation Ifugaos to learn about weaving, and on the other hand, you're opening a market, an income stream for the people. And so if you have that steady income coming in, then you can focus on other aspects of your heritage programs.
Yeah. I think it also goes kasi dun sa issue of as archaeologists, meron din kasi tayong different roles in the whole heritage management or public archaeology stream. I think dun din kailangan maging clear kasi amongst our ranks, meron ding mga tao that focuses on education. Like I remember this in Linnell's thesis defense, kasi sinasabi rin niya na marami tayong mga certain components where we can contribute as archaeologists. So some prefer to be storytellers, some prefer to be facilitators, some prefer that they really get into the sustainability and the heritage tourism aspect. And I think dahil medyo konti lang tayo na gumagawa ng ganito sa Pilipinas ngayon, this is the most perfect and opportune time to really collaborate with a lot of peoples, like what Mylene is also doing in Kalinga and Boboy, even the work also in Ile, and also with Tuklas, kahit sa Tuklas, hirap pa rin tayo to really get communications across. And with that, actually may tanong dito because we're talking about artifacts, and these are the foundations of our stories. So ang tanong dito, I think Taj can really answer this. Who technically owns these artifacts? I noticed that artifacts from archaeological sites usually end up in laboratories in Metro Manila. And under what circumstances are they returned or entrusted to the community?
Okay. I really do apologize for not for reserving my answer that because I'm currently representing here as a Tuklas and not as an NM person for the moment. And I will be clear with that. So whatever my views are will not represent the views of of the National Museum. So um, I'll give perhaps some opinions. So who owns artifacts? Well, it's under for in my own personal opinion, not as an NM personnel. It's in the law that says that
But it's in the law. It's not an opinion. It's in the law that the
yeah,
artifacts are, yeah,
anything that's found in archaeological
yeah.
sites are belong to the state. So let's be clear on that. It belongs to the state, and the National Museum is mandated to take care and to
Mhm.
They're the ones who to take care mandated to preserve and to take care of the um, archaeological heritage the of the Philippines. You know, they're the authority in doing that. Um, so I guess that's the like most basic answer that I could give. But of course, there's a lot of complications in that, which I actually don't wish to dwell too much on that because there's another division. There's a division in the National Museum who can actually answer that and who
Kasi
is
siguro based pa na lang din sa experiences ni siguro sa Kalinga and Kiangan and also in Palawan. Kasi there are community museums in the areas that you work with, right? So kasi pag sinabi nating state, technically pwede siyang national at pwede rin siyang sa local. I guess the context of this question is really dahil alam natin siyang sa state, but also local communities, since they ascribe to these artifacts, even if they are not culturally related to these materials that we find. Pero dahil nasa lugar nila, merong ganong klaseng ownership pa rin, 'di ba, na kahit paano they subscribe to. So for example, if it belongs to the state, then it goes to the National Museum at start, 'di ba? Pero what are the times where, or halimbawa sa cases nyo nga na nag-build ng community museums na hindi national museum, paano natin siya na facilitate that 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 local communities can also build community museums and they can house the artifacts that are found within their areas.
May I?
Yes, go.
Yeah, okay. So I think the concept, the idea there for keeping the artifacts with the state and specifically with the National Museum is for safekeeping. Because like, for example, in our context, we're dealing with fossils that are very, very rare and stone tools that are very rare. So first of all, they're while it's being studied, they are with the researchers. So they are in laboratories. They're being studied. Sometimes they're sent abroad for dating. Yes, that's true. Now, I don't think, and I've spoken to Director Barnes about this. I don't think he has anything against repatriation of artifacts back to where they came from. But I think there has to be, if you are going to repatriate the actual artifact, the actual specimen, do you have the infrastructure to receive and to protect these items? Do you have the expertise in your government, in your local government, who know enough about protecting and preserving and presenting these artifacts to your communities? So the best solution to that, since you have to admit, not everyone. I don't know if there are any towns or cities that have these capabilities. There probably are, but definitely not where we work. So the next best thing is to have a scientific cast of these items produced, and this is what we use in our exhibit of the rhino and the stone tools in Kalinga. And it's the same thing also that Mandy has this, Dr. Mijares has on display at the Cagayan Provincial Museum. It's the scientific casts of Homo luzonensis. And I think this is a good alternative to having the actual thing on display, because first of all, the actual things need to be analyzed. So that's the reason why they are elsewhere. And then you need also, you need for safekeeping, climate controlled and all of these things kind of environment that not everyone can afford or has access to.
Okay,
Yeah.
thanks, Mylene. Yeah, I think even the National Museum is open to, you can even request for the cast or the replica from the National Museum, and if there's a budget, they can provide those casts and those replicas to
I think it's
the
also,
community.
oo, kasi diba depending din siya on the classification of the archaeological site or material. If it's declared like a national cultural property, so it's also protected under the law.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay.
See, sa case ni Boboy and I think nila Linel, are there actual artifacts from excavations that are in the community museums?
Taj, should I answer?
Yes, yeah.
Well, yes. So it's an open. That's an open. It's not a secret that I was asked to turn over all the materials to the National Museum officially, and so I did. So all of the Kiangan materials are now with the National Museum, and that is a state. They are mandated by law as curators of Philippine heritage. So they have. So we turned over the materials to the National Museum in Kiangan, but the community wanted the artifacts for their heritage galleries. We don't call the Ifugao heritage galleries as museum because they're not doing research. It's a venue for local communities and those interested in Ifugao history and culture to learn about the local history about Ifugao. So there is a way for local communities to access archaeologically retrieved materials that have been or archaeological work that has been sanctioned by the National Museum, because there are materials that have been obtained by looting, and I don't know if that's covered by National Museum. I'm sure it is because it's an archaeologically retrieved materials. But for those of us who are sanctioned by the National Museum, then we are obligated to turn over the materials. But local communities can initiate an MOA with the National Museum, granted that the communities have, as what Mylene mentioned, the infrastructure to safeguard the collection. So there are a number of materials in the iPad Center, and this is between the community and the National Museum because the community is invoking the Indigenous Peoples' Rights Act and this has to be cleared by lawyers if National Museum really has precedence to the Indigenous Peoples' Rights Act that is being argued by the community that they would have to be the curators.
Yeah, thank you, sir. How about in the case of in Ile, in Palawan?
I think right now, the stuff that are there are replicas or A few things that are recent, that are not archaeological artifacts. And then the big dream is, of course, that we have this dream of them coming home eventually when everything is right, and when the systems are set up and field research station and things like that. But that will take time.
Yeah, kasi actually yun yung follow-up question kasi sabi sa a question for you is how can you expand this heritage action and move forward with their plans at Ile site? Yeah.
So one of the things that we're working on right now is site protection, and getting it like as a protected site with plants and things like that. But we'll see how that goes. So yun, it's landscape protection. So not just Ile, but other karsts and other things in the valley.
Thank you.
All right.
Go, Tash. Next question.
This is a question from Susan Alejo Petilla in Facebook. To all the speakers, do you believe that heritage or cultural heritage is not mere objects, as the Western world has prescribed, but rather it more of a socio-cultural construct, and must consider the people within the site that would really define that it is heritage? Is this now the new meaning of heritage?
Absolutely.
Raj, ikaw.
Sorry, I was looking for the question. Can you repeat that again? Sorry. Oh, here. Do you believe that heritage or cultural heritage is not mere objects as the Westerners prescribe, but rather more? Well, absolutely yes. Because cultural heritage is not just material culture. It's a whole culture.
It never was just about the objects.
Oh, it's cool. It's a complex whole. Kagaya ng what's defined. The basic definition of culture when we were in students of anthropology, it composes of not just a tangible heritage, but also intangible and also archaeological heritage. So food is cultural heritage. Food is cultural heritage. Dance is cultural heritage. Even the gestures and joking is a form of cultural heritage. So it encompasses everything, which is which it should be included as well. It should be an inclusive part of us when we're sharing about preserving cultural heritage. So when we talk about preserving heritage, cultural heritage could be very broad, but you could also be very specific about it. Gaya sa amin, we focus on archaeological heritage, so that's one of the things. But archaeological heritage is just part of the bigger cultural heritage.
Yeah, right.
There's other people who are also advocates of preserving other aspects of cultural heritage.
All right. I think this is thank you, Taj. I think this is a very important question, and I hope all the speakers can also answer this. On sustainability of the conservation of heritage archaeological sites, do you think that there is a gap or insufficiency of policies and laws to protect these sites?
Tasha, can I go back to the last question?
Oh, sure.
I should have. So heritage work, and as the question implies, it's part of decolonizing of what we do. But the irony is that the approach to ethics that underlies decolonization is a Western concept that originated with the Greeks and developed over the centuries in European Judeo-Christian philosophy, like human rights, a closely allied idea. This ethical approach is focused on the individual, not the community or other social group. This can make it difficult to reconcile the ethical tenets in our heritage work with systems of thought that support strongly hierarchical social orders based on group rather than individual identity, and which normally severely restrict the actions of individuals and indeed categories of people. So when we do, this is a comment on one of our work that when we think about heritage and decolonization, this is really a Western concept, the decolonization itself, and we have to look into the mirror and this is, are we doing this for us or for the people who owns the heritage. That's it. Sorry for
No, it's okay.
Thank
Thank you. With that, baka pwede nyo na rin pong ituloy to the next question, which was on the sustainability of the conservation of archaeological heritage sites. I mean, do you think that there is a gap or insufficiency of policies or laws to protect these sites?
I don't think maybe so you have several constitutionally mandated rules and regulations. So conducting research is regulated by the National Museum, and I think later it will be turned over to NCCA. And so the gap here, I think, is really more on developing a narrative, a story, like what Ellie is saying, the story of our heritage. So if we just keep on digging and digging and we keep on excavating materials and we don't do anything about it, that's the gap.
Yeah.
We have a lot of artifacts. Archaeology is a destructive process. If we don't have to excavate, don't excavate. Otherwise, we're pot hunters. I guess just when we do something, it has to be, unless it's salvage archaeology, then to mitigate the effects or the consequences of development projects, then yes, we can do that. But then we need to really look at what are we doing as archaeologists.
May I
Agree.
absolutely agree with Buboy. For me, I think the laws, we have enough, policies we can make as we go along. Heritage management is a process. So for me, the gap is really in the implementation. It's in the lack of a plan. The gap is the non-existence of a plan. At least I can say for in our context, there is no plan. There is no management. Again, it boils down to that word management. And I think in our field, I and from my experience, and again, this is just an opinion, not enough attention has been given to management and training people in management so that these concepts are developed and applied to our projects or archaeological projects or heritage management projects. So I believe the gap itself is the lack of a plan.
Anyone else? Ellie or Taj?
You wanna
Oh yeah. Well, actually, that's one of the things that for me, I find it very delightful or I love about this kind of discourse. For now, perhaps the thing is we continue to learn about more about ourselves, our communities, about regarding the protections of these sites. No, the laws and the policies maybe or could have been sufficient enough for now, perhaps. But as we learn more about some of the socio-cultural implications and the dynamics of the stakeholders, community in regard to these sites, we could actually learn more and how to improve on maybe on the policies or in the laws in protecting the sites. And for me, for now, it's the policies and laws are very it's somehow sufficient, and implementation is we're still developing more policies or implementation and how to implement these laws and in these laws, and we're all in the moving forward in making this a better. We're all moving forward into developing a better way of and more efficient way of protecting all these sites. So I cannot answer right now if it's really sufficient, but from what I'm seeing right now, the law is pretty much sufficient. So like Miss Mylene was talking about, it could have been some lapses or gaps perhaps in in the plans, but yeah, we're all learning about it.
All right. Okay. We would like to ask a last question at lunchtime na, guys. How do you envision an empowered community during the time na wala ang archaeologists or specialists sa site? What are they capable of? And what happens when local communities make their own discoveries without the expert archaeologists around?
Okay.
Maganda. Who wants to? Sir Boboy, you want to start?
So I guess so archaeology is not just about excavation, right? Archaeology is about it's you have other components of archaeology, and so in our case, I haven't been to Ifugao. The Ifugao Archaeological Project hasn't been excavating since 2016 in Ifugao, but I visit every year. But we are still publishing. We are still working with the community in terms of conservation, heritage conservation. So even though you're not there, if you have established a strong professional and personal relationships with the people that you work with, you can always they will lead in the research. So as I mentioned, globally, if the Ifugao Archaeological Project is cited as one of the major or one of the classic examples of a successful indigenous archaeology approach, and that's because we've engaged the community. It's not a one size fits all. It took about 4 years for Marlon basically to trust the archaeologist. So it's for us. It's easy for me because I've been working in Ifugao almost every year since 2007. But for some archaeologists, it's not the case. So for some archaeologists, you work in one site and another site and the next and the next. So you're not able to really cultivate that long-term professional and personal relationships. And so in this case, I guess the key really is community engagement. And even if you're not there, then you can work with them. And establishing this kind of relationship also allows you to integrate indigenous epistemologies in your work. And I think this is what I wanted to say earlier. And what's missing in our work is to integrate Philippine realities. We're still using Eurocentric cultural chronology of Paleolithic, Neolithic, Metal Age. What's that? That's not the Philippine reality. So I guess the focus is to integrate. I guess more work.
Again, I agree 100% with Dr. Acabado. Like now that we are not able to excavate, actually this is the time of the year that we are usually in Rizal, Kalinga for a month. This is our excavation season. But the work continues with Rizal as well as with Cagayan and Peña Blanca, in the sense that we're just letting this ECQ, GCQ blow over, and then we continue engaging with the communities and the local governments to develop further, to evolve further this heritage management concepts for each area. Like for example, we've already established, as Boboy said, no, it's very important to establish a relationship with the communities which we have, and then of course with the LGUs, which is very important, and the agencies of those LGUs. So we, for example, in Cagayan, we've started working with the offices, the cultural offices under Governor Mamba, and in Peña Blanca, we have developed and because I also have known them from childhood, a relationship with Mayor Taginod and Vice Mayor Taginod and Barangay Captain Tin Taginod, and it's the same in Rizal. It's a new administration, so we've had to reintroduce ourselves And this has brought more than a few complications, to be honest. But we're there. We're on that path of developing a relationship, a new relationship with the new government, with the new local government, and of course with the assistance of a very mature governor Governor Tuban. So yes, definitely, especially now that we are unable and we don't know when we are going to excavate again. Now is the time to cultivate, develop, and continue the engagement with communities and the locals.
Janelle?
Yeah. So envisioning an empowered community, right? Even when we're not on site.
Yes.
Yeah. Or what about the making what happens when local communities make their own discoveries without expert archaeologists around? Kasi sa Ile and around El Nido, very relevant tong question na to.
Yeah. So so for sometimes when they find things, in their backyard or something like that, because they know how to contact us, we will get a message na parang, we found this, ganyan. And if we're not there during that time, we will be like, oh, okay, sige, just keep it first. And then we'll look at it when we arrive or something like that. In terms of, but we don't have systems yet in place na parang, they can report it and then you'll have a database. That will be such a dream. Pero in terms of envisioning an empowered community, it would be like making us, in effect, disappear from yung scene, and to just be providers of, and you find a new role for yourself, right? Because, so one of the things that I like happening now with us is now when people are lobbying for protection for Ile or for the sites, even when we're not around. Now we don't have to do anything. And they will just tell us, oh, by the way, nagkaroon ng discussion and, protection of the site was involved and things like that. Yeah, so because other people care about the site too. And that for me is an amazing thing.
Thanks.
Thanks, Ellie. Okay, so okay.
Just a follow up to what Ellie said. I don't think local communities will take our job because they won't be digging the way we do. So they ask them to participate, and within 2 hours, if it's not for them, they won't do it. But yes, they will let you know if there are archaeological sites discovered.
I think Taj,
sorry.
maganda rin i-plug na sa tao ngayon, like when they find seemingly artifacts, anong dapat nilang gawin?
Yeah, I think it's one of the important to have knowledge of the laws, actually, primarily of the laws. Actually, one of the crucial things, siguro, for that would tell us that they're empowered is how they value or how is their attitudes towards archaeological sites and artifacts and objects. If they value, if they see it as their part of their lives, part of their communities, and which is warranted of protection, just like how they protect their history or how they would protect their community. So I guess that would define empowerment. However, being empowered also means they should have knowledge on the laws that it's nakakabit when it comes to protecting archaeological sites and cultural heritage. So when not just dahil hindi dahil may nakita silang mga artifacts, just because they see any artifact or discover any archaeological site, that doesn't necessarily mean that they have to dig everything or something. They still have that sort of restraint as a in respect to what the law is telling us. So that's how empowerment for me is can be for the community. So,
and again, sorry, I would like to add to what Taj is saying. This is all just going to happen if there is management. You cannot expect the locals to just do this on their own. In our case, in Rizal Kalinga, we have provided cell phones. We have somebody on the ground living on the site, so that anybody that finds an artifact while he is plowing his field can report that find to our person on the ground or to the local government, to the mayor, and then they are asked to turn over what they find, and we will put this on display in our Rhino of Rizal exhibit. That's why we have provided drawers that will eventually be filled up with all these finds, and then we will acknowledge them properly, like this tooth was found by Mr. So-and-so. But then again, this isn't just gonna happen. You need to guide, you need to be there to guide these people on what to do, and you need to follow through. And it all boils down again to management. And I think that is something that will be helpful for everyone while we are not in excavation.
There. Yeah. Ay, nakamute siya.
So, all right. Thanks, guys. That was very fruitful. And unfortunately, we have overtime na tayo at mukhang lunchtime na. Thank you so much for being here. I'm sure our viewers learned a lot. If anything, it became, because I was a speaker last Wednesday, and it became a practice for the three of us to comment on kasi after this live Facebook is done, it's going to be saved, right? So you can just go back to that link, and as speakers, if you feel like answering any of the comments or questions there, go ahead, as what I did with my co-presenters last Wednesday. We just went, actually this morning ko lang binalikan yung ibang comments, and maybe you'd like to do the same, so that these people who ask those questions can have like a transcription of those answers. Okay, Kate, up to close.
Yeah. Thank you. Before we close, syempre tatawagin natin ulit yung mga kasama natin sa Nayong Pilipino to give us a few more reminders before ending. Ms. Laya?
Okay, maraming salamat, Kate. Magandang tanghali sa lahat. Huwag muna po kayo bibitiw. Bagong lahat, maraming salamat sa ating mga resource persons at salamat din sa mga katanungan ng audience. Makakatulong ito lalo na sa Nayong Pilipino na pinag-iisipan kung paano ibabahagi sa publiko ang kanilang permanent collection. So gusto muna namin sanang ibahagi itong call for digital content or rhizomatic interventions ng Nayong Pilipino. Makikita ang guidelines dyan sa link sa poster na nakapaskil sa aming page, yung link na nakikita nyo ngayon na sa screen nyo. So itong call na ito, ano ba ito? Sa June 10, proposals pa lang naman ang hinihingi ng Nayong Pilipino. Maaari itong workshop, lecture, featurette docu, advocacy campaign, storytelling o iba't ibang uri ng pagtatanghal. Meron lang tayong mga tema na susundin na nakasulat dyan at malawak naman ang bawat isa. Let me just expound on this, no? So yung new solidarities under crisis, siguro magandang tanungin, paano nagbagong ideya ng ating komunidad ngayong may COVID-19? Ano ang mga bagong uri ng pakikiramay at pakikipagkapwa na nabuo? Paano ba nananaig ang lakas at ideya ng bayan kahit na may krisis? So maaaring katanungan yon. Kung ginagawa ang inyong proposal, no? Yung saving our sites for ecosystem and human well-being, meron bang mga likas na yaman sa inyong lugar? Paano ito pahahalagahan ng komunidad? Meron bang maaaring maibahagi na interaksyon ng tao at kalikasan na maaaring practice na makakabuti sa komunidad? Yung civic formation for nation building, ano ba ang civic formation and creative agency? Paano ba maging makabayan? Paano magpaka-Filipino? Ano ang mga lokal na kaalamang makakatulong sa bayan? Sustaining the Nayon, ano ang mga kaugalian sa komunidad, mga taal na kaalaman na patuloy na nananatili at nagpapatatag sa komunidad? Yung taking stock of our cultural assets, ano ba ang ating mga sagisag kultura? Ano ba ang pamana sa ating lugar? Ano ang kahalagahan ng mga cultural bearers? Mga tradisyon sa paglikha, awit, dula, mga kaalamang hinubog ng panahon at ng bayan. Yung biodiversity conservation advocacy, meron ba kayong maibabahagi tungkol sa Las Piñas, Parañaque Critical Habitat and Ecotourism Area o yung tinatawag na La Papachea? Tandaan na hindi lang naman sa paggamit ng eco bag at bamboo tumbler na nasusukat ang pagiging makakalikasan, di ba? Baka meron kayong maibabahagi tungkol sa kahalagahan ng urban forests, biocultural heritage, urban rewilding, at mas malawak na marine corridor. Maraming salamat. Tandaan sa June 10, mag-email ng proposals ang ating nayon@gmail.com. Back to you, Tasha and Kate.
Thank you,
Thank
Dr.
you,
Laya.
Laya.
Ayan. Guys, please send your proposals.
Yes. Actually, before we end, gusto ko lang ulit magpasalamat kay Dr. Stephen Acabado, kay Ms. Maylene Lising, kay Ms. Linel De Castro, and Sir Taj Vitales. And if, again, sabi nga ni Tasha, kung gusto nyong makipag-interact din dun sa mga nagtatanong, please look into the Facebook page of Nayong Pilipino Foundation so that we can continue on this interaction afterwards. Actually, I just wanna close sa isa sa mga questions ng isa sa ating viewers, and this is something that we can all ponder on. Sabi ni Ms. Susan Petilla, do you believe what Laura Jane Smith said, that heritage is not existing but is defined by people today? Heritage. So maganda siyang pagninilay-nilay kung kanino nga ba ang heritage natin. Okay, so with that, maraming salamat ulit sa lahat ng sumama dito sa Umpukan, and we hope to see you again in the next sessions of Nayong Pilipino Foundation. Magandang
Thanks,
tanghali.
everybody. Happy lunch.
And dinner for Boboy. Thank you very much for the invite. I learned so much. Thank you.
Thanks, everybody.
Salamat.
Thank you, Lely. Taj, thanks.
Yeah.